Hey, so I know I kind of gave y'all an overview of what this video series was going to be talking about, but today we're going to be digging in and creating our template so that we can really maximize all the features that LITE gives us. In fact, let's check it out right now. So, the big thing that we want to focus on here is that LITE lets you use 8 audio and MIDI tracks. And that's not 8 of each. That is 8 total. So we're going to have to do some very creative programming in our template to really maximize LITE's potential. Let's dig into it right now. You open it up and it's going to give you a certain number of audio and MIDI clips already created, or channels, MIDI channels. We're going to delete all those and create 8 MIDI tracks. You can create a MIDI track by right-clicking in this right-hand area, this big open gray box, and select Insert MIDI Track. Now we can just take a MIDI track, and if you highlight it and press Command D, you can duplicate it. We're just going to create 8 because that's what we are limited to. Once you've done that, we're going to start working on building our template from the ground up. And by the ground, I mean the foundation of a track, which is the drums. So let's create a drum track. We're going to select our bottom MIDI channel and create an instrument rack just by dragging instruments, instrument rack, drag it onto the channel. Inside our instrument rack, we're going to drag a drum rack. Why did we do this? Well, in this right-hand area, you are going to see 2 instances of these little buttons. The top one creates macros. The bottom one lets you see what's inside the rack. And the middle, that's the important one. That lets us see our instances of instruments inside the rack. So we've got one drum rack inside the instrument rack. We can Command R after highlighting it to rename it. We'll call this intro. So these are going to be our intro drums for the introduction of the song. While it's highlighted, we can click Command D and duplicate it. Command R again to rename it, and we'll call it drop. So essentially what we have done here is we have created 2 channels within the instrument rack. And this is extremely beneficial because this is another form of creating a bus for bus processing, where you have a bunch of different sounds channeling to one channel. And that is the foundation of how we're going to be building this template. All of our individual instruments are going to be tucked away under racks and different groupings or subgroupings. We'll rename the total thing by highlighting the channel, and Command R will rename this drums. Now let's get into our FX. Click MIDI channel 7 and drag a drum rack. We don't need an instrument rack because the drum rack has 128 samples that can be loaded at any given point. I'm going to demonstrate this, why we would use a drum rack over a sampler. We can create it as a one-shot, and what that means is the MIDI clip doesn't have to extend all the way through the sample. Once it triggers, it'll play the entire thing. Let's check it out. And you can do that with multiple samples once you get them loaded in. Let's go ahead and throw a few more in there. Come on. Come on. There we go. We got 3, so we'll go 1, 2, and 3. That is essentially how our effects rack is going to work. So because we're only doing one drum rack and we're not creating an instrument rack, we can rename the entire channel FX and leave it at that. We are going to be creating our sub bass. This is like the meat and potatoes of your track. The sub bass gives it body, it gives it fullness, and it's one of the most important aspects of music today. Without the sub, everything feels kind of thin and hollow. So to create our sub channel, we're going to drag an instrument rack and then select our instrument rack and press Command G. That's going to put an instrument rack within an instrument rack. Don't worry about it, it'll make sense in a minute. Go to your plugins. I hope you have Serum because that's one of the external plugins that we're going to be using to aid our process in getting the most out of LITE. Drag an instance of Serum into the second instrument rack. So to make this perfectly clear, you should see instrument rack, Serum. You with me? Good. Now we're going to expand the outer instrument rack, the one that is the top layer, and we're going to choose this first instance, which is the instrument rack within it, and we're going to duplicate it by pressing Command D. And what this does is it copies everything inside. So now we should see 2 instances of Serum and 2 instrument racks. What we can do now from here is take our top one and rename it Intro, and take our bottom one and rename it Drop. And what we've done is, again, like the drums, we've created a bus. We can go to our Midi channel and rename that Subs, and we're like halfway done with this template already. Let's keep moving forward. These next 2 are going to be super simple. All we're going to do is drag instrument racks onto the next 2, and we're going to rename these channels Drop 2 and Drop 1 respectively. We're not going to put any instruments in there yet because we don't know what instruments we're going to want in this track. So we can collapse those and just forget about it for now. Go to MIDI lane 3, same thing, instrument rack, and we can rename MIDI lane 3 Intro. Forget about it for now because we don't know what it's going to sound like yet. That leaves us with 2 MIDI lanes. Now, what you do from here is kind of dependent on what you want your track to be. If it's going to be completely instrumental, then you can keep them as MIDI clips or MIDI lanes and use them in either your intro or your drop just to give yourself a little bit more flexibility when writing your parts. If you wanted to have some vocals, you may want to make one or both of these audio clips. Just select and delete them and insert audio tracks. And then you can rename it vocals. I can't spell. There's vocals and vocals 2. I cannot spell 2. The reason you might want to use 2 vocal channels is if you want to process them differently in different points in the track to kind of add this level of contrast. I'm not going to tell you what to use those last 2 channels for. That is completely up to you. But besides that, this is our template, and this is what we will be making a track in. And I hope that you start to see just how good this little $100 software is. Hey, I almost forgot. The whole point of this was to be making a template that you could use as a fresh start for each project that would have everything loaded and streamline the whole production process. So once we've gotten to this point, go over and click on Live, Preferences, click on the File and Folder tab, and then click Save Current Set as Default. Now, once you've got this bare bones template set up, you can go through and let's say you want to have a certain set of drums that you use every time it Live opens up. You can save that as part of your default, and that will just make the songwriting process that much easier. So yeah, just didn't want to forget that. Now, like I said, the software is $100 on its own, typically, if you buy it as Live Intro. You can get it as Live LITE if you buy one of these USB audio workstations, the Focusrite Solo. It comes bundled. It comes with a 3-month Splice subscription, and I don't see why you wouldn't do that, especially if you're on a budget, you're trying to get the most for your money, and it's kind of a win-win because you get a nice piece of hardware that will last you for years as you expand your studio, and you get a pretty decent software application that is way more powerful than people give it credit for. And that's why I am doing this, and I hope you all find it helpful. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Dab, 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 dab.